Hey, it is that time. Another edition of Unlocked with Fox's Brock Huard right here on Disrupt the Media. Like, subscribe, give us that thumbs up. And as always, brought to you by our friends at MyBookie. Use that code next round. You will get that first deposit bonus from mybookie.ag. So coming off two really big games this past Monday, New Year's Day. We started first, the Rose Bowl. I was there. The Sugar Bowl, I forgot. Were you there or not?
Okay. Nope. I decided I'm going to keep my budget and I'm going to go to Houston. I felt pretty good, honestly, about the Huskies in that matchup. And I will be heading to Houston tomorrow for a fun 4 days.
I think when you and I talked, I think we're some of the few that like the combination of Michigan, Washington, old school Rose Bowl, a game that you played in that matchup. Might be the last time those two teams matched up, is it?
No, they've matched up a few times since then. Neuheisel had a good win at home, and just 2 years ago, man, in Ann Arbor. Actually, my nephew was the backup, and Damon went out there, my older brother, and he came back. He's like, dude, that stadium is amazing. The music they now play, and that was like an all maize night, blue night out, whatever it was, and the stadium was just ridiculous, and they just spanked and totally embarrassed the Huskies. That was kind of the start of Jim's turnaround after a brutal 20 and made the coaching changes, and so they have faced each other, but not with these kind of stakes, if ever. Man, it's going to be something Monday night for sure.
Yeah. So Rose Bowl. I liked Michigan. I didn't like them as much as I liked Washington against Texas for whatever reason. But Michigan plays really well on offense and defense in the first half. The special teams, complete disaster.
Yep.
Alabama makes some adjustments in the third, completely shut down that Michigan attack up until the final 3 minutes of the game where they drive down, tie it up. Ultimately, it goes to overtime. Couple of things on that. First, the final play has been really scrutinized from Alabama in overtime. I didn't mind the play call. If you're Jalen Milroe, you take it outside, right?
Yeah, you just have to, and it's a bummer. You know, it's gosh, what is a good analogy? There's probably a pitcher and a catcher analogy with a bad snap. Like you just get a catcher that's just itchy back there, like maybe facing a knuckleballer where it's just like, oh gosh, you know, like where is this knuckleball going to come here? Where's it going to, and it just creates some anxiety versus a guy that is just dialed in and those catchers can frame and they don't have to think for a second. I think when you get as many just awkward snaps as Jalen got over the course of the game, over the course of the season, right? From that center, you're just constantly thinking, and that's the one thing in that moment you can't have. You just want to react. You don't want to be thinking for 1 second, is this snap going to be okay? You know, take my mind, my energy off anything, anywhere. And then that snap comes low and immediately he's got to field it. And at that point, then his instinct to run and go is the only thing that flamed up. Because if it's a perfect snap and it's on the whiteboard, Tommy Rees drew that up to give you options. Here's options for you. Here's option one, right? Run pass option, obviously, but here's option one. And it's easy to see. We're going to make that picture as easy as I can in the biggest moment. And how do you do that, Lance? You know, from an old quarterback, Tommy Rees, to a play caller, Tommy Rees, to the new quarterback, like I'm going to do that by motioning. And that motion shows the picture. And when that linebacker was trailing by 5 yards, I'm sure Tommy's in that booth like, throw it. And he didn't, because he's going to score. He's going to walk in. And unfortunately, he did not. It was a bad snap. I think instincts kick in, use my strength, use my power. I'm going to run through people. And even with that, if you could have just had a little more awareness to widen out, you know, there may have been a chance certainly to get closer and sniff the end zone, which he didn't come close to doing.
Well, we talk about the center exchange, and Seth McLaughlin has since entered the transfer portal. He will unfortunately
witness protection or transfer portal down there.
Yeah, he'll be remembered in Alabama lore is the guy that couldn't have the clean quarterback center exchange. Look, I know as a quarterback that played for as long as you did, you've obviously had bad quarterback center exchanges. The game a little bit different. You were more under center back then. But did you ever have a consistent problem with a guy out of shotgun that just really couldn't get it to you?
Not really, man. Not like that. But in 17 years of being on the college football road, it's amazing how many times that comes into play and how many of these systems with elite guys. And Oregon had one a couple of years ago that it was just like automatic in the difference. And he could put like right shoulder, left shoulder. And you just think, okay, that running back to the left, how much quicker even that mesh, you know, that half little second there, that just makes it that much harder to set the whole table for everything. But, you know, even having said all of that, and the hyper focus is on the final play, I would say as I watched that game, I thought the whole game, like, okay, Michigan's Michigan's like the better team. Like they're when are they going to pull away? And you said Alabama did stifle them, and they did. But if JJ throws that shallow cross on the numbers on a third down, and that third down is caught instead of goes through the freshman's hand, like they had so many opportunities, kind of like Washington did. I know we'll get to the Sugar Bowl in a second to kind of step on it and say, okay, let's finish it. Because I just felt watching it, and Milroe had no sense of protection, no sense of awareness at the line of scrimmage. He's getting hit in the side of the head. They slide the line. You got 2 free runners. He still doesn't even look over there. Like, oh my gosh. And finally, at halftime, they made the right adjustment and said, enough of this. We are not protecting. We are not making him process because it's not happening. So let's get back to pounding the football. They did, got back in the game. And, save for a 4th down conversion Michigan got late in that 4th quarter, we may be talking about an Alabama-Washington rematch.
Yeah, I never really I always thought Michigan was the better team, at least in the game.
Yeah.
Alabama did have the 7-point lead with 3 minutes. Flipping over to the Sugar Bowl, Washington seemed like the better team. Now, I will give you full disclosure, about 7 minutes left on the clock. Unfortunately, Dunaway and Brown had some
gastro issues.
It wasn't that. It was more just transportation issues.
Gotcha.
And the Rose Bowl, I know you've been. I don't know if you've been as an actual spectator. It is a complete pain in the ass.
Yes.
The logistics are terrible.
Horrible.
So they did all their post-game hits, interviews. They wrapped it up. They tried to get an Uber out. They could not find one. The only shuttle they found took them to downtown Pasadena. Brewery. I left at halftime, by the way. This is a move I typically do just because I don't want to deal with the crowd.
That's right.
And so I got out of there. I knew the halftime was going to be a long, drawn-out Rose Bowl halftime, as it usually is. So I had plenty of time to relocate to a downtown bar, but I had to go and pick them up. So I had to listen to an AM frequency call, Washington, Texas. So I didn't see the very end. I got to hear it. But when I watched, I really thought Washington was going to pull away and win the game by 14 to 21 points.
Yeah, and a 13-point lead there, and then they get the turnover, and they get the third down pass interference on a Dunze, and you're thinking, oh boy. And actually, we chatted with Sean McDonough this week, who will be on the radio call of the national title game, and he was starting to say to his producer, I know how this works, like, hey, let's get some human interest stories going, right? I mean, if this thing gets to 20 or 21, this thing may get out of hand here. So let's dive into some of the other stuff we have. And then there were a couple of mistakes. I thought mistakes from a game management standpoint, a play calling standpoint, that Washington got greedy. And when you get greedy, you can get slaughtered. And when they just went for the haymaker after that conversion, instead of running it, a little short pass, they go for a little trick play, does nothing, incompletion, got to punt it. And I was like, oh, I don't like that. I really did not like that at all. Texas, I think, goes down and scores, and Washington comes back and scores, yada, yada, yada. And then fast forward to the final 2 minutes, where your boy about lost his freaking mind. I mean, I had flashbacks to the Super Bowl with New England, just as every Seattle fan and Pacific Northwesterner did. Like, this isn't happening. Like, that didn't just happen. I don't think I've told you the story of that play, the New England Seahawks play, but we were at a house like we were the year before with about 100 friends, and mostly kids, and, kids of all of these relationships. And so there's 2 different viewing areas in my buddy Graham's house. One, the main living room where all the husbands and wives were, and then a back one with the kids. Well, the back one was 7 seconds ahead of the living room.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. So all of a sudden you hear from, the kids' room, like, oh no, that didn't happen. I'm like, oh gosh, what's about to happen? And that's kind of what I was feeling, to be honest. When they threw it on third down and didn't just run it and take another, force Texas to burn their second timeout. So they had only 1 left. So then when you get the onside kick, the game is over. You get to kneel 3 times and it's done. So then when they had the incompletion, I'm like, that's bad. That's really, really bad. You're going to want that. That's going to come back and bite you. It's kind of like golf or some of these other sports. If you don't play the game the right way, it's going to come back and bite you. Baseball, it came back and bit them. And then ultimately, when Dylan was down on the ground, I mean, I did a confession on my show this week, so I'm forgiven for it. But I am screaming at him to get up, hop, crawl, get to that sideline. Lineman, pick him up. I am screaming amongst my 5 guy friends, and they're looking at me like, what's wrong with you? I knew the rule. They didn't necessarily know the rule. And I'm like, you don't understand. You don't understand. You don't even know what's going on right now. Like, they're going to get 40 seconds. This game should be over. And those defensive guys thought they're going to have to defend for 10 seconds on a, funky play. This game's over. It's over. It's over. And it wasn't over. And it was very nearly the worst loss. It'd have been worse than the Super Bowl.
Well, let me ask you this. Yeah, for obviously for a Seahawk and a
Yes.
Washington fan. But what would have been the worst loss? Because you look at the endings of both of these games in regulation, when Jake Thal tries to, I don't even know why you had somebody back to field a punt if you're Michigan. That game went to overtime. He fields it inside of the 5. I'll give him a lot of credit, and Herbstreit did as well on the call. He was able to get that ball back on about the foot line and control it before he was taken into the end zone. So what would have been worse, the Dylan Johnson injury that ultimately leads to that possession, or Michigan losing on a play that really the guy shouldn't have been back there?
I'm going to say the Washington one would have been worse because it took 1, 2, 3, multiple things to happen instead of one kid, which we see with 18 to 23-year-olds. Like, that's going to, I'm sorry, that's awful and woeful. And you talked about the special teams in Michigan, like that's going to come up and bite you. That would have been horrendous for that individual and that kid and his parents and his grandparents and his friends and his future wife and everything else. But for Washington, it would have been a calamity of errors of like, wow, that mistake, wow, that mistake, wow, that injury, oh my gosh, that just, as I kept saying, like, that just can't happen. That just can't happen. And as I got in my horse stance on the final play with the final second of the game, and I got down there, and then the explosion, and my buddy Tom sprained his thumb. I think it's my fault because I went way too hard and the chest bumps and everything else. So, yeah, man, your boy was out of control.
You know what, man? I get it. And look, you're really objective, and we're going to get to the national championship and a couple of NFL games here in a sec. It is Unlocked with Brock Huard. Fox's Brock Huard, former Washington Husky. It is brought to you by LancesLock.com. Jump on board where we are a clean sweep 3-0 on January 1st. Since the turn of the calendar, we're 14-3, so we are winning. Now, jump on board as we head into the meat of college basketball, the NBA, and, of course, we've got the national championship game, Week 18, coming up in the NFL. Go to LancesLock.com. But you are an objective guy. But, look, you played there, man, and it's not like Washington's winning championships all the time. So, this could be, and I think Kalen DeBoer is great. I think he's one of the top 5 coaches right now based on 2 years at Washington. I know what he did at Fresno and some other places. But you just don't know with the 12-team playoff how many opportunities you're going to get. Yes. And so now you've got a one-game set against Michigan to win a national championship, something that has not been done at your alma mater since 1991. So I get it, man. I would think the entire state is buzzing right now.
Yeah, in college is different. I mean, it's just generational. It's familial. My brother went to school there. My dad's state-winning quarterback Billy Joe Hobart went there in the 80s. There's quite a pipeline from Puyallup High School to the University of Washington, and Joe Kralik and Dane Looker and Todd Elstrom and the Huards and Billy Joe and Tom Gallagher. Like, there were a bunch of players from our high school that made that 50-minute trip to put on the purple and gold to the purple and gold. And it's moments like these that it just brings it out. And I know in heading to Houston, I'm going to see people and players and previous generations of players that I have not seen, but maybe once or twice in the last 30 years. So it just brings, people together, different than pro sports. Pro sports is really that team. Golly, that group of men in that locker room for that season, right? And then the following season, 35% of them are new. College is just different, go on that journey for 4 or 5 years together. In this day and age, 6, 7, 8 years together at some spots. You realize that the Huskies have 9 guys, Lance, 9, that are 6-year players that have been there for all 6 years.
It's incredible.
There's other teams with 6-year players, and Penix is a 6-year player that came in. But there's 9 guys that have been there for 6 years together. It's just different.
That goes back to Chris Peterson, right?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Jimmy Lake and now Kalen DeBoer. And you just don't exactly right. Guys, any chance they get to not only get poached, but just to get out of a situation.
Yeah. How many other teams are in a 6-year span are going to have 3 different head coaches? And then at the end of it, be 14-0, chasing perfection in the greatest. It just doesn't happen. Right? It's continuity. It's Dabo. It's Nick. It's continuity that matters. And Kirby. You build these things. You don't have 3 different head coaches in 6 years and play on this mountaintop. So yeah, man, it's some pretty special stuff in the water.
Kirby and Nick. Look, their teams are always, according to Vegas, always a little overinflated when it comes to the numbers. Washington can't buy respect. I mean, go back almost double-digit dog against Oregon in the Pac-12
Yep.
championship. Nobody gave them a shot against Texas. Went off as a 4.5-point underdog. They're sitting as a 4.5-point dog against Michigan. Your colleague, Joel Klatt, was on our show yesterday. He said he thinks it's a matchup nightmare for Washington. This is
Mhm.
they didn't want to play. How do you feel about the matchup right now as we head into the national
Yep.
championship?
Nope. I understand a lot of that because Michigan's ability to run, and unlike other teams that will want to be balanced, Michigan could come out. Do you remember that game years and years ago? And it's kind of an abstract game. You may not remember it, but it was, it was the Brady and the Patriots versus Steelers, and they came out and threw it like 16 straight times. Like, screw it. We're not going to try to run against this front. Like, we're going to throw it every down. Michigan could come out in this game and run it if they get the ball. And it'll be kind of curious to see who wins the toss and what they decide to do, because there's an argument for both. But if Michigan comes out, I wouldn't be surprised if they run it 12 to 15 straight times. Like, sorry, your front's not very good, and they're not. And the individuals are not very good, but the sum of all of the Washington defensive parts do make it happen in the second half. So I think that's where Joel's coming from, and I totally get it. Like, they're going to take the air out. They're going to play smash mouth. They're going to be unapologetic bullies, and they're going to be committed to that run in ways that nobody else in college football is. See also what happened in Happy Valley. They don't care, right? That's what they're going to do, and that's Washington's biggest weakness. They are really average, save for Braylon Trice up front. You know, as I look at this, Lance, and I got my little board here, and I look at Michigan's defense and Washington's defense, it would be 9-2. Braylon Trice and Muhammad, the corner, would be the only two starters. You would take 9 Wolverines.
Yeah.
And, so that's tough. Now, on the flip side, Michigan, I know they're number one on everything defensively. Do you know how many top 50 offenses they faced this year?
Oh, I would think that Alabama and Ohio State would be the only two. I would say two.
Two. And it's not that in those Alabama and Ohio State offenses compared to their peers of the last 10 years, you might argue, right, or the worst Alabama and Ohio State offense of the last, 10 years, consistency-wise, talent-wise, and everything else. So they've not faced this. They have not. And I think Washington has faced some of the equivalency. I think Oregon's defense, bigger, stronger, faster, longer, I think they're right there with Michigan's. I think Texas's front, right there with Michigan's front. So they faced, physical challenges like this. They're going to be able to move the ball. It's just whether or not in any semblance they can stop Michigan's run game.
Look, I know it's a different NFL now than what you played in. But I don't think this was really knee-jerk. Like, I love Caleb Williams. I love Jaden Daniels. I think they're going to be outstanding. I've got a feeling Michael Penix Jr. might end up being the best pro out of this deep quarterback draft. I mean, he doesn't get flustered. His pocket presence, his footwork in the pocket, one of the reasons he's only taken 11 sacks, quick release, and the deep ball is it's spot on.
Yeah. He has got to go to the right place where he doesn't get beat up. I mean, I would co-sign on everything you just said. The arm is exquisite. The ball comes off his hands different. The NFL ball that he's going to have the luxury of throwing is going to be even prettier than the college ball, which you can't really do, but he's going to make that all happen. But, you'll hear this comp, I think, as we get closer to the draft, Lance, and they're both South Florida guys. When I had Washington last year with Penix a couple times, he brought up the name. And when I say it, you're going to be like, wow, their bodies are really similar. Now, their hand size and their arm is drastically different. One is right-handed, one's left-handed. One has tiny Teddy Two Gloves at 9.25-inch hands. One's going to have almost 11 with Michael Penix at the combine. But there's a lot of Teddy Bridgewater. 6'2", 214, lanky, don't carry a lot of mass, don't carry a lot of size, and get beat up. And, Penix won't be able to do at the NFL level what he's done the last 2 years. You brought up 11 sacks this year, 5 sacks in all of 2022. He's been sacked 16 times in 27 games. If he goes to a bad team in the NFL, he might be sacked 16 times the first 5 weeks.
Yeah, i.e. Bryce Young.
And this is sacked not against, no offense to Stanford or Cal or ASU. This is sacked against the Browns. This is sacked against grown men, bigger, stronger, even faster. So that's the only concern. And the NFL will be legitimately concerned about the durability. If he were to play in San Francisco tomorrow, he'd light up the screen. If he were to play for McVay and the Rams, those weapons, light it up. A place that knows how to protect. He's got to go to an offensive-minded, know how to protect, have people around me to get the ball out of my hands to protect, again, a frame that is pretty slight and is going to get nitpicked an awful lot over the next 3 months.
Before we jump into the NFL, do you want to give us a prediction for Monday night?
Yeah, I think Washington can win this game like 30-24. 30-27. Like I could see that happening. And I know, and maybe Joel mentioned on your show what he said on mine, which is possessions. Possessions. Going to be so critical. Well, you know what? Washington has played a lot of games versus Oregon, versus Texas, where it's 10 or 11 possessions. They don't need 16. They maximize every one of them. And if they get ahead, like if one team gets ahead of the other, I think Washington can come back on Michigan. They can protect them. They got all these weapons in all these different places, tight end, slot, outside, screen game. Like they're going to be able to move the ball. But if Washington gets up 10, 13 points, and you take Michigan out of that mindset and that ability to run it every single down, I don't know if Michigan's got the capability. I know they don't have the capability to come back like Washington does. So I could see a 30-24 kind of win, and special teams. Both teams were a mess a week ago in the special teams phase of it, and special teams may once again on this stage play a pretty significant role.
It is Unlocked with Fox's Brock Huard. It is on Disrupt the Media. Make sure you like, subscribe, give us that thumbs up. It was always brought to you by our friends at MyBookie. Use that code NEXTROUND. Get that first deposit bonus at mybookie.ag. First game of Week 18 in the NFL. We had the Baltimore Ravens. Steelers have won 3 consecutive games in Baltimore. We got backup quarterback Tyler Huntley to play for. Ravens will lock down the number 1 seed in the AFC. Pittsburgh, everything to play for. They've got an opportunity to get into the postseason here. They're going to have to do it with Mason Rudolph. God, this is kind of a yucky game. Pittsburgh favored in this game.
Yes.
And Baltimore, again, has nothing to play for. Do you think Pittsburgh wins this game and ultimately gets to the postseason?
I think they could. I mean, I was in person watching that Seattle debacle and thought, man, it was more Seattle's mess than it was Pittsburgh playing well. But going back and actually watching the tape, no, it was about Pittsburgh running over and through them. 19 missed tackles at the NFL level. I mean, that is an absurd number. And it's not just about the Seahawks doing. It was about a very motivated team. And I think they've kind of, in Mason, found a guy that's like, hey, he's a pro now. I mean, he's played pretty good at this level. He's won some games here for us. I think he's just kind of stabilized. Like, I'm good. I'll throw it 24 times. We'll pound it 40 times. And you know what? I've got a great arm. And this Pickens guy out here, I know he's mercurial to say the least, but that dude can flat out play. And the last 2 weeks has just been just a new guy, a different guy with Mason under center. So yeah, no, that team I saw, maybe I'm too prisoner of the moment because I witnessed the bloodbath in person of them physically humiliating the Seattle Seahawks. They did it in Seattle. They can do it again, especially against a number of the backups the Ravens will play.
Yeah, Tyler Huntley, I think he's 1-3 in his last 4 starts. I think the bigger news for Baltimore coming out is they signed Dalvin Cook. He cleared waivers. Everyone passed. The Ravens pick him up. He's going to be on their practice squad. Then they'll be able to evaluate, is he a guy that can make a difference in divisional play? I mean, Dalvin Cook from Minnesota was really good. I don't know really what happened in New York this past year. I mean, Breece Hall was obviously the go-to guy.
Mm-hmm.
You think Cook fits right now because the Ravens, you lose your 2 starting running backs, starting with J.K. Dobbins and then Keaton Mitchell. Now you've got Gus Edwards, but he doesn't have that home run ability like Cook.
Yep. No, you needed somebody else. You needed a 2 there, and throw in Lamar is really, I think once we get to the playoffs, especially, and with another week of rest, he's kind of the 1 running back, and Gus is the 2 running back, and now Dalvin could be the 3 running back, and that's a pretty comfortable role. And I look at, not to go back to the college game in Michigan, Washington, but to me, Michigan feels a lot like Baltimore. Washington feels a lot like the Kansas City Chiefs. It feels like that kind of game there. And I think with Baltimore into these playoffs, it's going to be fascinating, man, because it's never been set up better. Kansas City is messy. Cleveland's got Joe Flacco. We'll even see if the Bills can get there, right? They got to win amazingly to control their own destiny and get into the playoffs. So
it could still be the 2 seed.
They could. I mean, Buffalo would be. I mean, it's not ever going to be an easy and clear path, but this would be the year of all the years that it sure feels like Baltimore is set up. And I think a Dalvin Cook is, an addition and why they make that move. Like, yep, okay, we feel totally set up. Now let's bring a pro. Playoff experience, an absolute stud to just give us some more needed depth at a very need position.
Week 18, Rams head to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. Much like Steelers, Ravens, a lot of starters are going to be rested in this. Niners have got the 1 seed. For the Rams, though, I think there's a big difference in going to Dallas and going to Detroit. Like, not that you trust Dak Prescott and Dallas in the postseason, but the way they play at home. I mean, you saw in week 2, your Seattle Seahawks went up there, beat Detroit in Ford Field. I guess the Rams' thought process now was, look, in order to make this run through the NFC, we're going to have to play the best anyway.
Yep.
And that's the only thing I can see here.
Yep.
Because
in the favor health, right? And in favor, Cooper's legs and Stafford, who's had to endure some injuries this year, and just kind of favor health and prioritize health over the matchup of Dallas or Detroit, who, I think each of those environments is going to be brutally hard. Each of them are loaded explosively on offense. I would rather play Detroit's defense in Detroit than I would Dallas's defense in Dallas with that noise. And as you said, playing off of the emotion in the crowd. Yet, I mean, my God, that Detroit place is going to be full throat and then some for a playoff game. So, I would probably be with McVay, who knows his team a little better than anybody else and knows maybe how banged up some of these guys actually are, and to get them their rest and give them, with their best stars, the best chance they can on the road.
You tell me how difficult it is in today's NFL. Like, the last quarterback I can remember doing it was Eli Manning with like a 9-7 New York team, able to go on and win 3 road games to get to a Super Bowl. I find
have an elite defense. I mean, that's the only way. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's the only way that happens.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I find it hard to believe, but like a Rams team, everybody's talking about how dangerous they are. Matt Stafford's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
He's got the experience. But, to be able to win in Dallas, turn around and win in San Francisco the next week, and then I can't even imagine those 2 scenarios. But
correct.
Yeah,
it's impossible to imagine that. And the Giants were able to do it because their front and their 4 could beat the 5 of anybody. And they got hot, and that defense was incredible. And then Eli had enough on offense, Manningham and some of the other pieces to make it happen. But that's the only way, in my mind. Like a non-1 or 2 seed is going to be able to do something like that and go on the road. Defense travels, and it has to travel in an elite way. And I don't see your Rams having that. I don't see the Cowboys or the Seahawks or, the Packers or anybody else, that would have that kind of style to really challenge the people at the very, very top.
Okay, the last time we saw 49ers play a relevant game was a couple of weeks ago against Baltimore at home. Baltimore comes in with a chip on their shoulder. Brock Purdy throws 4 interceptions. To me, that's the only way San Francisco loses, right, is turnovers?
I think so, yeah, and getting to Purdy and getting beat up. They lose Trent Williams in that game. And when they did lose early in the year, there was no Debo, there was no Trent. There were a bunch of guys that were nicked up and beat up. So, if you start to put together a most irreplaceable San Francisco 49ers, and we do this on our local show with our hometown teams, like, okay, you can't lose this guy. Yeah, you can't lose this guy. I think for San Francisco, that list does not start at quarterback like it does for everybody else, right? For your Rams and for the Lions and the Eagle, everybody else, you can't lose your quarterback. For them, I think it might be a toss-up between Debo Samuel and Trent Williams and Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, and go down the list. There's 5 or 6 of them there that don't really want to lose. George Kittle, can't lose Kittle, can't lose Debo, can't lose
9
Trent.
Pro Bowlers.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, it's unbelievable. So that's no slight on Brock. He's the one that's got to stir the whole drink. And you're right. When he turned it over and he got hit and the ball gets tipped and anything can happen. But yeah, it feels like, and in the week 18, and then as we do this through the playoffs, it sure feels like Baltimore and San Francisco are just deeper and better than the rest in this league this season.
He is Fox's Brock Huard. It is Unlocked here on Disrupt the Media. I'm Lance Taylor. From the next round, make sure you like and subscribe. It is brought to you by Lance's Lock, lanceslock.com. Get a free play every single day. Again, since 2024, the calendar flipped 14-3. We're rolling right now. Jump on board. We are hot heading into week 18 of the NFL. Okay, the most intriguing game to me, Buffalo heads to Miami to take on the Dolphins. Buffalo completely dismantled Miami earlier this year in Buffalo.
Yep.
This is one of those scenarios that we talked about. Buffalo could lose this game and be on the outside, missing the postseason, which I can't even imagine as a Bills fan. Typically, I'd say 99% of the time you win double-digit games, you get into the postseason.
Yep.
But if you would have told me as a Bills fan before the season we're 10-7, I would have been like, what the hell happened? But that's where they are right now. And they're taking on a Miami team that is banged up, but Miami is also hungry to get a win. Ultimately, Josh Allen on the road here, do they get it done against Miami?
Gosh, do you feel like you trust Josh Allen?
No.
I mean, that's like
Not
if
not
you
in not in really big games.
yes, and on the road, I mean, at home, if it was cold and nasty and miserable, I'm absolutely going to trust him in that matchup. But having to play this one's down in South Florida, correct?
Yep.
I just don't know if I trust that guy enough. And then the speed with which Miami plays at home, like and I don't know if the record is indicative of this. I know it is for Dallas. Their win-loss record, their scoring margin off the charts, as much number one in the league. The disparity, home and away. I would have to think Miami is a team that is built, that flourishes at home. So no, that's a pick 'em to me, man. That is an absolute toss-up, and how healthy Miami can be, and really just how reliable and trustworthy Josh Allen can be. Going to be huge storylines to watch in that one.
Okay, I tried to go back and use the old memory to figure this out. You played in the league for a long time. You've covered it. I can't remember the last time we've had a team miss the postseason where you would say that team could have won it all. Because
Correct.
the biggest challenger for the Ravens are if the Bills get in.
Yep.
And I can't remember. Can you recall a situation where a team missed postseason and you said, damn, that team could have won a Super Bowl?
Yeah, I bet you there's some teams, Lance, that lost some just huge stars, right? Some huge key figures, and maybe lost a quarterback. Oh man, if they hadn't lost their quarterback, can you imagine? They could have been, I bet you over the last 20, 30 years, there are some of those teams that had key injuries, right? That lost their Josh Allen, that lost a handful of their players and weren't the same. But the team that actually is there with all of their players and their difference makers, no, I can't remember this at the end of the road for sure.
Yeah,
And I'm kind of rooting for him, by the way. I don't know why. I think we did this in our preview, our very first show. It'd be fun to go back and listen to it and look at some of the things that we were prognosticating and where this thing could turn. And I think I said it to you then, and as it runs its course, I'll say it. I just find myself rooting for Buffalo. And maybe it's after furthermore, a little more what happened with Corvallis and Pullman. Just seeing those markets decimated and destroyed by the powers of being college football, and knowing and calling games in Buffalo and in Green Bay, and knowing like those markets matter. Like they're part of the fabric of it, right? They're the part that makes it go. And you can have New York and LA and all these big markets, but you need a Buffalo. And I found myself for some reason rooting for them with no attachment, never played there or anything, more than maybe any other team. So I hope they can get it done down in South Florida. Playoffs would be better if the Bills are in the playoffs.
I do empathize with some of these fan bases, being a Rams fan and just how, because I was talking to a Titans fan the other day. I had my Rams gear on. I was getting ready for a game a couple of weeks ago. And we were talking about it, and he said he's a Titans fan. I said, just hold with it. I was like, because one day if you win a championship, it is so worth it. And Bills fans to have never won a Super Bowl and to be so close, especially on that first one they were in against New York. Yeah. I can't imagine the suffering these people go through.
Yes. And then how sweet it's going to be. We talk about that in our Seattle market with the Mariners. Like this run with the Huskies is unbelievable. And certainly those of us that played there and in Western Washington, but there's a lot of newbies. There's a lot of new population to Western Washington. The influx of a lot of the new students and the demographics very, very different than even my time there, and certainly in the Wayback Machine. So, and college does that. You don't, there's Cougs on the other side that hate the Huskies, and Ducks that, live there that hate the Huskies and don't want any rooting interest. But the team in our market that's like the Bills is the Seattle Mariners. And the fact they've never been to a World Series, the only team that's never even been and touched a World Series. If and when they win it, Lance, it's going to be an explosion, maybe only rivaled by those Bills fans and the Bills Mafia up there in upstate New York.
Damn, is that like trivia knowledge on the fly? Of the 30 Major League Baseball teams, Seattle's the only team that has never been
it's right there,
to a World Series?
I believe so. I believe that. You can fact check me on that, but I'm pretty darn sure of it.
Oh my God.
And they've not even really sniffed it, to be honest with you. So, yep. When that happens, it is going to be. I just was chatting that with Salk on my show this morning about that. I'm like, we're taking calls. We're hearing the Husky fan base. And this year was like, everybody thought they'd be good, but 14-0 and a national title. Come on. Like, this is just so sweet. Just cherry on top, icing on the cake. And, there's certainly a ton of excitement. The 20,000 tickets sold like that. And my brother that works there he said he's had like 5,000 people out of the woodwork. Like, I need tickets. So it's there, but not like the Mariners. I mean, when and if, as I said, the Mariners can finally get there and be relevant and win a World Series, that town is going to melt. It is going to just be absolutely nuts.
I am excited for you as we wrap here on Unlock with Fox's Brock Huard, brought to you by MyBookie, mybookie.ag. Put in that code next round, get that first deposit bonus on the house at mybookie.ag. I am not, we had the conversation today. We would be leaving for Houston today to cover the national championship if Alabama would have won. And I'm like, I'm really cool with sitting at home this weekend. Air travel sucks now. I got delayed again yesterday. It's like at least every other flight is delayed. What is your itinerary right now? Do you leave on a Friday?
I'm going to leave Saturday, and you're right. And I kind of chuckle about this because when the Seahawks went to the Super Bowl in 2005, you remember where that was?
It was Houston.
That was in Detroit. That was in Detroit.
Oh, yeah. No, it was Detroit against Pittsburgh, Super Bowl 40.
Oh, my gosh. Just awful. I mean, just for a fan base, like, okay, we're going to go to the Super Bowl, in New Orleans or Tampa or LA, or like go to some sunshine. Oh, no, we're going to Detroit. And, of course, when the Huskies go to the, national title game, is it in Dallas, New Orleans, Miami, LA, Phoenix? No, you're going to go to Houston. It's going to be down there in Houston. No offense to Houston, but Houston's not any of those other locales. So
it's a shithole, and it's the second worst traffic behind Los Angeles, in my opinion. I've been to Houston. I had a buddy that played for the Astros. I went to a Super Bowl there. I didn't find anything redeeming about Houston. I like the stadium. I thought Reliant was cool.
Yeah, the food's pretty good. The barbecue down there is pretty good in Texas. That I'm not gonna lie about that. You got good barbecue in Alabama, so you don't need to leave home. And yes, you're gonna enjoy it from your seats. We will travel down, Titus and I, my boy, on Saturday. I've got a whole bunch of Husky events lined up. I'm going to see a lot of old teammates, a lot of old friends throughout Sunday and tailgate Monday. I'll do my show. They've got kind of a quasi radio row down there. So I will do my show on Monday and Tuesday down there, and hopefully celebrating. I know this, it won't be as intense. It can't be, because I can't stand up like a fool. I can't chest bump and rip thumbs off and pound the mantle and get in my horse stance while I'm sitting in the stands with a lot of Huskies. And let's hope it, if it comes down to the final play, screw it. Let's roll the dice, 50-50 shot to do something unbelievable for the university.
Yeah. Would you take this scenario? Penix has got the ball on the 13-yard line, 2 seconds on the clock, fourth down. They're down 6.
Yeah, I'd take that shot. Yep, I take that shot. And one of these teams may have that one possession. And golly, the semifinals, you couldn't have written. I mean, you just said that's as messy as college football is, and it's much stuff off the field that is so unsustainable. I'll say it nicely, unsustainable. On the field, the product, you just can't write some of the stuff. And as these stories unfold, and in the final year of the Pac-12, to have Michigan and to have Washington and to have those two decide, it's pretty darn special stuff too.
Well, I'll tell you, my rooting interest, I say Washington. I don't know where I'm going to go on this on lanceslock.com yet. My rooting interest is for Washington. You have a lot to do with that, because I know how much it means to you. I love Kalen DeBoer. I like the Penix story. And the fact of the matter, back to a baseball analogy, Michigan's going to be considered the 2018 Houston Astros if they win this thing. I mean, and not that, they were cheating last week or, the week before, but people are still going to have that asterisk next to it, fair or unfair.
Nope, that's true. And then the fireworks begin too, because I'm of the belief that this will be Jim's last game. I think he will move on to the NFL. I don't think he wants to deal with any more of the NCAA nonsense and what is looming down the road. And he was this close, and I know that for a fact. He was this close to taking the Broncos job last year, did not take that, wanted to be with this group of men. Because this group of men for Michigan is pretty darn special, and they've showed that all season long as well. But more than likely going to be his last, and then what? Do they elevate from within? A lot of sources and people around the program say 90% that it's going to be Sharon that's elevated from OC and the job that he did this year. Or do they look at across the sidelines? Because I think Michigan is the only job in college football that Kalen DeBoer would consider. Having Midwest roots and South Dakota roots and ties there, and coached at Eastern Michigan and everything else, and going into that conference instead of on a half share like Washington's going to be for the next 3-4 years, going full share and then some with the place that Jim has put them to over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and LSU's Brian Kelly, another one of those names to watch out for if, in fact, Jim Harbaugh is on to the NFL. Great way to close there. Always incredible stuff. Safe travels. Good luck to your Huskies, man. It's going to be a fascinating national championship watch. I'm excited for it. Should be a great game.
It should be, and sure appreciate these, man. It's fun living every week, and both looking back and looking ahead, and with the NFL playoffs looming, man, we're gonna have a ton of great storylines. Even though there is two kind of behemoths sitting there, and we all think the two number ones will be the last one standing. We also know how the NFL works and playoffs work, man. It doesn't always work that way as well. So we'll have a great January. Happy New Year, Lance, to you and everybody, and kudos to that 14-3 start, man. Stay hot.
Gotta stay hot. Knock on wood, lanceslog.com. Safe travels. He is Fox's Brock Huard. This is Unlocked right here on Disrupt the Media.